somewhere beneath the quiet fields of eastern China, hidden under layers of soil that had rested undisturbed for thousands of years, something extraordinary waited in complete silence. It was not a palace. It was not the tomb of a famous emperor. It was not even a city whose name had survived in history. Instead, archaeologists uncovered something that seemed almost impossible. They found thousands of carefully crafted jade objects, unlike anything anyone expected to see from such an ancient time. Some were shaped like perfect circles. Others looked like mysterious square tubes. Some were carved into birds, animals, and faces, whose expressions still seem strangely alive today. The craftsmanship was so remarkable that one quiet question slowly began to appear among researchers. How could people living more than 5,000 years ago create something so beautiful with tools made mostly from stone? That question has never completely disappeared. And perhaps, before this night is over, it may quietly become your question too. Because tonight, we are not simply visiting another ancient civilization. We are walking into a forgotten world that existed before the first great Chinese dynasties rose to power. A world without written records, without famous kings, without armies whose victories filled history books. Yet somehow, this mysterious society left behind jade treasures so astonishing that even modern experts still pause in quiet admiration whenever they study them. The people themselves disappeared. Their language vanished. Even their true name was carried away by time. Only the jade remained, like silent whispers waiting for someone patient enough to listen. As we begin this slow journey together, you may discover that history is not only made from the stories that survived. Sometimes, the greatest stories are the ones that almost disappeared forever. And if calm journeys into forgotten worlds like this help you slow your thoughts after a busy day, then perhaps this is the perfect place to become part of our quiet community here on Coding School. Many people return night after night because every journey uncovers another forgotten corner of history that textbooks rarely pause long enough to explore. If that sounds like the kind of adventure you would enjoy, you might gently consider subscribing. And if you find yourself relaxing as we travel together, leaving a like simply helps these peaceful history stories reach others searching for the same quiet escape. Now, find a comfortable place. Allow your breathing to slow naturally. There is nowhere else you need to be. Tonight, we are going to walk through one of history's greatest forgotten mysteries. The story begins long before the Great Wall, long before the Qin emperors, long before paper, silk roads, or imperial capitals became symbols of China. To understand this lost civilization, we must first imagine a very different landscape. 5,000 years ago, eastern China looked nothing like the crowded cities we know today. Instead of endless highways and towering buildings, rivers wandered freely across wide plains. Forests stretched across gentle hills. Marshes reflected the morning light. Wild deer moved quietly between ancient trees. Birds filled the sky with sounds that echoed across valleys untouched by machines. Small villages appeared beside rivers where fertile soil allowed families to grow rice. Each season followed a rhythm that people understood deeply. Spring brought planting. Summer demanded careful work. Autumn rewarded patience. Winter offered time for repairing homes, making tools, and telling stories beside warm fires. Life depended completely upon nature. People observed every cloud, every change in the river, every movement of birds and animals. Survival required careful attention. But while many communities across the world lived this way, something unusual was slowly happening in one particular region near today's Yangtze River Delta. At first, the changes were almost invisible. One village became slightly larger. Families built stronger wooden houses. Storage buildings appeared. Rice farming became more organized. People learned to control water more effectively through small canals and simple engineering. These improvements allowed food supplies to become more reliable. When people spend less time searching for food, something remarkable often happens. Some individuals begin doing other kinds of work. A few become better builders. Others become skilled potters. Some spend years learning how to polish stone until it becomes perfectly smooth. And somewhere among these growing communities, a handful of remarkable craftsmen discovered something that would define their civilization forever. They discovered jade. Now today, when we hear the word jade, we often imagine jewelry displayed inside bright stores. Small pendants, bracelets, decorative carvings. But 5,000 years ago, jade was something entirely different. Finding good jade was already difficult. The stone formed naturally under enormous pressure deep inside mountains. Large pieces were rare. Transporting them across rivers and forests required incredible effort. Even after obtaining a piece, another challenge remained. Unlike softer stones, jade is unbelievably hard. In fact, it is harder than steel in certain ways when resisting breaking. Stone tools could not simply carve it like wood. A sharp knife accomplished almost nothing. Imagine trying to shape a rock using another rock that is softer than it. It sounds almost impossible, yet somehow, these ancient craftsmen succeeded, not through strength, but through patience. Instead of cutting jade directly, they slowly wore it away using sand mixed with water. Tiny grains acted like millions of miniature cutting tools, hour after hour, day after day, month after month. The surface gradually changed. Every curve appeared through endless repetition. Every polished edge represented extraordinary dedication. One mistake could destroy months of careful work. Some researchers estimate that a single large ceremonial jade object may have required hundreds or even thousands of hours to complete. Imagine one person spending years creating just one object, not because someone forced them, but because their society believed the finished work carried profound meaning. Already, we begin seeing something important. This civilization measured wealth differently. Power was not shown only through weapons. Status was not displayed only by large buildings. Instead, enormous amounts of time and effort flowed into creating beautiful objects that may never have been used for ordinary life. Why? That quiet question follows us everywhere we look. As archaeologists continued excavating ancient sites during the 20th century, another surprise slowly emerged. The jade objects were not random. Certain shapes appeared again and again. Perfect circular discs known today as bai, square tubes with circular openings called kong, beautiful axes that seemed almost too delicate for practical use. Bird carvings, turtles, dragons unlike later Chinese dragons, human faces whose expressions remain mysterious even now. Each object seemed carefully designed according to traditions repeated over generations. This suggested something remarkable. These people shared beliefs, shared symbols, shared ideas, Entire communities agreed that these shapes mattered, but why these particular forms? No written explanation survived. No ancient book tells us. Everything must be understood through careful observation. Imagine discovering thousands of computers thousands of years from now. Without electricity, without books, without language, future archaeologists might guess their purpose, but certainty would remain impossible. That is exactly our situation. The jade speaks, but it never speaks directly. Every answer creates another question. One especially fascinating object continues attracting enormous attention. The Kong. At first glance, it seems almost impossible to describe. Outside, it is square. Inside, a perfectly round hole passes through the center. Sometimes human-like faces appear carved onto each corner, creating one required astonishing precision. Remember, these craftsmen possessed no electric drills, no metal machines, no modern measuring equipment, only patience, stone, sand, water, and extraordinary skill. Some Kong were small enough to hold easily. Others weighed many kilograms. Researchers have proposed dozens of explanations. Perhaps the square represented Earth. Perhaps the circle symbolized heaven. Maybe together they reflected harmony between two worlds. Or perhaps these meanings belong entirely to later traditions, while the original purpose has been lost forever. That possibility is both frustrating and beautiful. History reminds us that not every mystery receives an answer. Sometimes the silence itself becomes part of the story. As settlements continued growing, one location slowly became unlike anything surrounding it. Today we call it Liangzhu. 5,000 years ago, it may have been one of the most sophisticated places anywhere on Earth. For centuries, nobody suspected what lay beneath the fields. Farmers planted crops. Children played. Rain quietly washed across the land. Meanwhile, hidden below, enormous foundations waited patiently. When archaeologists finally uncovered the site, they realized they were not looking at a simple village. They had discovered the center of an entire civilization. Large earthen platforms supported important buildings. Wide water systems controlled rivers. Protective walls surrounded key areas. Roads connected different districts. Evidence suggested careful planning rather than accidental growth. This was urban thinking. Long before many civilizations elsewhere had developed comparable settlements. Imagine standing there at sunrise, mist rising above canals, workers carrying baskets of rice, craftsmen polishing jade inside wooden workshops, children chasing each other beside narrow paths, boats gliding silently through carefully managed waterways, smoke rising gently from cooking fires. Nothing about the scene would suggest that thousands of years later, almost everyone would forget these people ever existed. And perhaps that is history's quietest lesson. Entire worlds can flourish. Generations can laugh, build, create, dream, and love. Then time slowly covers everything with earth, until one patient discovery allows forgotten voices to whisper once again. Morning arrived gently over the wetlands surrounding Liangzhu. The first light did not rush across the landscape. It slowly touched the quiet rivers, the tall reeds, and the wooden homes that stood above the damp ground. Mist floated just above the water, making the entire settlement seem as though it were waking from a peaceful dream. Long before the sound of busy markets or crowded cities, people here already understood something very important. Water was life. Almost every decision they made was connected to it. Their homes stood near rivers. Their rice fields depended on carefully controlled water. Their boats carried food, tools, timber, and perhaps even jade across long distances. The rivers were not obstacles, they were roads. If we could quietly walk through Liangzhu 5,000 years ago, we would probably notice that people rarely seemed to be in a hurry. The rhythm of life followed nature rather than clocks. The rising sun began the day's work. Birdsong replaced alarm bells. Changing seasons became calendars. Rain was watched carefully. The movement of clouds mattered. Every family understood that their future depended upon working together. Rice farming, more than many other crops, required cooperation. One farmer alone could not control large irrigation systems. Entire communities had to build canals. They repaired embankments together. They directed flowing water with remarkable precision. Modern engineers who study Liangzhu continue to be impressed by these ancient water management systems. Thousands of years before advanced machinery existed, people had already learned how to reshape the landscape without destroying it. Instead of fighting nature, they quietly partnered with it. Large dams guided water. Canals connected different areas. Reservoirs stored precious supplies during changing seasons. This was not random construction. It required planning, organization, leadership, and perhaps most importantly, trust between thousands of people. Imagine trying to organize hundreds of families without written instruction manuals, printed maps, mobile phones, or computers. Every decision required conversation, memory, experience passed from one generation to another. Knowledge lived inside people rather than books. A grandfather might teach his grandson where floodwater usually arrived first. A mother might explain exactly when rice should be planted after watching the stars and weather for decades. Children learned simply by observing adults every single day. Little by little, wisdom accumulated, not inside libraries, but inside living communities. That may be one reason Liangzhu became so successful. Knowledge was shared constantly. As the settlement expanded, different people naturally became experts in different skills. Some families became known for growing the healthiest rice. Others built boats. Some specialized in woodworking. Others shaped pottery whose smooth surfaces still survive after thousands of years. And then there were the jade craftsmen. Even within an already advanced society, these individuals occupied a very special place. Their workshops must have been unusually quiet. Unlike blacksmiths from later ages, there were no loud hammer blows echoing across the village. Instead, the work demanded patience almost beyond imagination. Picture a craftsman sitting cross-legged beside a block of jade. A bowl filled with fine quartz sand rests nearby. Water slowly drips across the surface. A simple cord wrapped with abrasive material moves back and forth for hours. Tiny particles gradually wear away the stone. The movement appears almost gentle. Yet after enough time, hard jade slowly begins to surrender. The process teaches something that many ancient cultures seem to understand. Great achievements rarely happen quickly. Instead, they grow almost invisibly through endless small efforts. One careful movement, then another, then another. Perhaps that is why jade itself became such an important symbol. The stone seemed to reward patience above all else. You could never force it. You could only work with it. The finished object reflected not only technical skill, but also the personality of the person who created it. Every polished edge represented discipline. Every smooth surface reflected countless quiet hours. When archaeologists examine these ancient carvings today, they often notice something extraordinary. Many pieces remain almost perfectly symmetrical. Their surfaces are astonishingly smooth. Some holes pass through thick blocks of jade with incredible accuracy. Creating such precision using Stone Age technology seems almost unbelievable. Naturally, this has inspired many imaginative theories. Some people claim lost machines. Others suggest mysterious, forgotten technologies. A few even imagine visitors from distant worlds. But history usually offers a gentler explanation. When enough time, patience, knowledge, and determination come together, human beings become capable of astonishing things. Perhaps that is even more remarkable than mysterious machines. The greatest tool these craftsmen possessed may simply have been patience, and patience leaves very little evidence behind. As more excavations continued, archaeologists discovered something equally fascinating. Not everyone owned jade. In fact, many ordinary homes contained simple pottery, wooden tools, and everyday objects. Large collections of beautiful jade appeared mainly inside certain burials. This tells us something important. Liangzhu society was probably becoming more organized and more unequal. Some individuals held greater influence than others. Whether they were chiefs, religious leaders, respected elders, or something entirely different, we cannot know with complete certainty. But their graves reveal careful preparation. Imagine one of these ceremonies. The community gathers quietly. Family members carry precious jade objects polished across many years. No one rushes. Every movement follows traditions repeated countless times before. The body is placed carefully within the grave. Jade discs rest near the chest. Kong tubes stand beside the body. Small carved animals surround the burial. Each object seems to carry meaning understood by everyone present. Perhaps they believed jade protected the soul. Perhaps it connected heaven and earth. Perhaps it represented purity, wisdom, or eternal life. No written words remain to explain these rituals, only silent arrangements of beautiful stone. It is almost like reading a book with half the pages missing. Enough survives to understand the story existed, but not enough to read every chapter. This mystery has fascinated generations of researchers. Different scholars propose different interpretations. Some focus upon religion, others emphasize political power. Still others believe jade represented both spiritual belief and social authority at the same time. Maybe these ideas cannot be separated. Throughout history, many civilizations connected leadership with sacred traditions. Kings often ruled through religion. Priests advised political leaders. Ceremonies strengthened entire societies. Liangzhu may have followed a similar pattern. One clue appears repeatedly. The finest jade objects required enormous investments of time. If one craftsman spent an entire year producing only a handful of ceremonial pieces, someone else had to provide food. Farmers supported craftsmen. Builders constructed workshops. Boatmen transported raw materials. This means jade production depended upon an organized economy involving thousands of people. Such cooperation does not happen by accident. Behind every beautiful artifact stood invisible networks of workers whose names have disappeared forever. Sometimes history celebrates kings, but civilizations are really built by ordinary people. The farmer planting rice before sunrise, the child gathering firewood, the woman weaving baskets, the fisherman checking river traps before dawn, the carpenter repairing homes after heavy rain. Without them, no magnificent jade object could ever exist. Their quiet labor supported everything else. As we continue walking through Liangzhu in our imagination, another remarkable feature begins appearing everywhere. The city itself seems carefully designed. Unlike settlements that simply expanded randomly over time, Liangzhu reveals signs of planning. Buildings occupied specific areas. Important structures stood upon raised platforms safe from seasonal floods. Roads linked neighborhoods together. Canals connected transportation routes. Water flowed where people wanted it to go. Even today, urban planners admire cities that balance nature with human needs. Liangzhu accomplished something surprisingly similar 5,000 years ago. Perhaps that is why UNESCO recognized the archaeological ruins of Liangzhu City as one of humanity's great cultural treasures. The site demonstrates that complex urban civilization appeared in this region much earlier than historians once believed. For many years, people assumed early Chinese civilization began mainly along the Yellow River. Liangzhu quietly changed that understanding. History became richer, more complicated, more interesting. Instead of one simple beginning, ancient China now appeared as a landscape containing multiple advanced cultures developing in different regions. Civilization, it seems, rarely follows one straight road. It grows through many voices speaking at once. Some become famous, others nearly disappear. Yet all contribute to humanity's long story. One particularly peaceful evening, let us imagine a young apprentice entering a jade workshop for the first time. He watches an older craftsman polishing a small ceremonial disc. Nothing dramatic happens. There are no magical secrets, only careful observation. The master says very little. Instead, he demonstrates. The apprentice copies, again and again. Tiny mistakes are corrected patiently. Months become years. Eventually, the student no longer imitates. His hands remember movements automatically. Skill becomes instinct. This may have been how knowledge survived, not through written textbooks, but through quiet relationships between generations, teacher and student, parent and child, grandparent and grandchild. Every civilization depends upon this invisible chain. When even one generation forgets important knowledge, entire traditions may vanish. Perhaps that realization makes Liangzhu feel strangely familiar. Even today, we inherit countless things from people whose names we will never know. Languages, customs, recipes, stories, ways of building homes, ways of growing food. Even simple habits often travel silently through hundreds of generations. History is not only preserved inside museums, it also lives quietly inside ordinary people. The citizens of Liangzhu probably never imagined that thousands of years later complete strangers would admire their work. They simply lived, worked, raised families, solved problems, celebrated harvests, mourned losses, dreamed about tomorrow. In many ways, they were not so different from us. Time changes clothing, technology, and languages, but hope remains surprisingly familiar across thousands of years. And as evening slowly settles once more over this forgotten kingdom of jade, the polished stones resting inside quiet workshops continue reflecting the soft light of distant fires. waiting patiently for another pair of careful hands to continue a tradition that already feels older than memory itself. Night had passed quietly. As the first light returned across the wetlands, the city slowly came back to life. Thin lines of smoke rose from cooking fires. Wooden boats drifted gently through calm canals. The morning air carried the soft sounds of birds that had filled these marshlands long before people built their homes here. Nothing appeared hurried. Everything moved with the rhythm of nature. If we stood on one of Liangzhu's raised earthen platforms and looked across the landscape, we might not immediately realize how extraordinary this place truly was. From a distance, it seemed peaceful, simple, almost ordinary. But beneath that quiet appearance existed one of the most carefully organized societies of its time. Every canal, every rice field, every workshop, every home, all depended upon planning that stretched far beyond a single family. Civilizations do not appear overnight. They grow slowly like trees, year after year, generation after generation. One small improvement encourages another. A stronger bridge makes travel easier. Better irrigation produces larger harvests. Larger harvests feed more people. More people create new ideas. Those ideas slowly reshape an entire society. Liangzhu seems to have followed exactly this path. One discovery quietly supported another. One generation left opportunities for the next. Over many centuries, the settlement expanded into something far greater than anyone living there may have imagined. Among the many discoveries made by archaeologists, perhaps none is more surprising than the enormous system of dams, levees, and reservoirs surrounding Liangzhu. For a long time, researchers believed these earthworks were simply natural hills or ordinary changes in the landscape. Only after careful surveys did a remarkable picture begin to emerge. These were not random formations. They were engineering projects, huge ones. Some stretched across vast distances. Others connected different waterways with astonishing precision. Together, they formed one of the oldest known large-scale hydraulic systems anywhere in the world. Imagine what such a project required: thousands of workers, careful planning, shared knowledge, leaders capable of organizing labor over many seasons, food supplies large enough to support workers while they built rather than farmed. Above all, it required trust. People had to believe that months of difficult work would benefit everyone. Without that shared belief, projects of this size simply could not happen. Modern engineers who study these ancient water systems often express quiet admiration. Even without modern machines, Liangzhu's builders understood how water behaved. They knew where floods would travel. They recognized how rivers changed with the seasons. Instead of resisting nature completely, they guided it. Water was encouraged to flow where it could help rather than harm. This way of thinking feels surprisingly modern. Today we often speak about working with nature instead of against it. Yet 5,000 years ago, these people were already practicing that idea. Perhaps history is not always a straight line of progress. Sometimes ancient wisdom quietly waits for later generations to rediscover it. As archaeologists explored deeper into Liangzhu, they uncovered another puzzle. The city itself covered an enormous area. Its central zone alone stretched across several square kilometers. Around it lay additional settlements connected through waterways and roads. Rather than existing as a single isolated town, Liangzhu appears to have been the heart of a much larger network. Smaller communities surrounded the center like branches growing from a great tree. Each village probably contributed something different. Some specialized in farming. Others gathered timber. Some produced pottery. Others may have focused almost entirely on jade craftsmanship. Together they formed an interconnected world. This reminds us of something important. Even ancient civilizations depended upon cooperation. No city could survive alone. Food traveled from one place, stone from another, wood from distant forests. Ideas moved with travelers. Traditions spread through marriages between families. Trade carried not only goods but also stories. Perhaps somewhere beside a quiet river landing, merchants greeted one another with familiar smiles. Children watched strange boats arrive carrying stones unlike any found nearby. New songs were learned. New techniques were shared. The world may have seemed vast, yet it was already connected in quiet ways. One question naturally follows. Where did all the jade come from? The answer is fascinating. Much of the finest jade discovered at Liangzhu did not originate nearby. Instead, it came from mountains located hundreds of kilometers away. This means someone traveled remarkable distances. Perhaps groups organized seasonal expeditions. Perhaps trade routes linked distant communities. Perhaps trusted partnerships developed over generations. Transporting massive blocks of jade without carts pulled by powerful animals would have been an extraordinary challenge. Imagine moving heavy stone across forests, rivers, hills, and marshes. Every kilometer demanded effort. Every journey required planning. Every successful arrival represented weeks or months of determination. By the time raw jade reached Liangzhu, it had already become something precious. Then craftsmen invested hundreds more hours transforming it into objects of astonishing beauty. Suddenly, we understand why jade held such importance. Its value did not come only from rarity. Its value came from human effort. Every polished surface contained invisible stories. Stories of mountain miners, river travelers, boat builders, craftsmen, families. Entire communities contributed to every finished piece. The object became a symbol of cooperation stretching across enormous distances. Perhaps this explains why jade eventually gained such deep meaning throughout Chinese culture. Long after Liangzhu disappeared, later generations continued honoring the stone. Dynasties rose and fell. Empires expanded. Philosophers wrote great books. Yet jade remained respected. The famous philosopher Confucius, who lived thousands of years after Liangzhu, praised jade for qualities such as purity, wisdom, kindness, and integrity. Of course, Confucius almost certainly knew nothing about Liangzhu itself. Its memory had already faded. Yet perhaps some traditions survived quietly. Ideas sometimes outlive the people who first create them. A symbol can travel across centuries even after its original meaning changes. This is one of history's most beautiful mysteries. Not everything disappears completely. Sometimes fragments survive. A custom, a word, a design, a belief. Like seeds carried by the wind, they find new homes in later generations. Standing quietly among the excavated ruins today, visitors often notice how peaceful the landscape feels. Birds still circle overhead. Water still reflects the changing sky. Grasses sway gently in the breeze. It is difficult to imagine thousands of people once living here. Laughter once echoed across these fields. Children chased one another between wooden houses. Craftsmen carefully polished jade beneath open shelters. Priests, or perhaps respected elders, prepared ceremonies whose meanings we can only guess. Every ordinary day seemed completely normal to those living it. Nobody believed they were creating history. That thought is strangely comforting. History is usually written only after countless ordinary days have quietly passed. As the afternoon sun moves slowly across Liangzhu, let us visit one of its workshops once more. This time, however, our attention turns not toward finished masterpieces but toward the tools themselves. Archaeologists discovered grinding stones, polishing equipment, simple drills, fragments of unfinished jade. These humble objects rarely receive the same admiration as completed carvings, yet they reveal something equally important. Great beauty depends upon ordinary tools. Masterpieces begin with simple equipment held by skilled hands. Even today, artists often treasure their brushes more than finished paintings. Musicians care deeply for their instruments. Writers become attached to familiar pens or keyboards. The relationship between creator and tool remains timeless. Perhaps one elderly jade craftsman in Liangzhu held a favorite polishing stone for decades. Its surface gradually wore smooth beneath his hands. His apprentice eventually inherited it. Years later, another student inherited it again. The stone itself may have outlived several generations. Knowledge often travels through objects as much as through words. The more archaeologists study Liangzhu, the more they notice remarkable consistency. Certain carving styles remained stable for centuries. Measurements repeated themselves. Symbols appeared again and again. Such consistency suggests education, standards, shared traditions carefully maintained over long periods. Random communities rarely produce this level of artistic unity. Someone taught these rules. Someone preserved them. Someone believed they mattered deeply. Perhaps every young craftsman first learned the old designs before attempting anything new. That idea feels familiar even today. Musicians practice classical pieces. Painters study earlier masters. Architects learn ancient principles before designing modern buildings. Innovation often begins with respect for tradition. Liangzhu appears to have understood this balance very well. Its artists created astonishing works not by ignoring the past, but by building carefully upon it. And as another quiet evening settles across this remarkable world of jade, lantern light begins reflecting gently from polished green surfaces resting inside wooden workshops, each one carrying within it not only beauty, but the patient memory of countless human hands working together across generations whose names have long since drifted beyond the reach of history. As another gentle morning unfolds across the wetlands, a thin layer of mist once again covers the quiet waterways surrounding Liangzhu. The city awakens slowly, almost silently. Small fishing boats drift across calm channels. Farmers walk toward the rice fields carrying wooden tools polished smooth through years of use. Somewhere in the distance, a craftsman opens the door of his workshop, preparing for another long day beside a block of green stone that may not be finished for many months. Everything feels peaceful, yet beneath this peaceful rhythm, something much larger is quietly taking shape. Liangzhu is no longer simply a collection of villages. It has become a civilization. That word civilization is often imagined as enormous stone monuments, powerful kings, or famous battles. But when historians carefully examine the past, they discover that true civilizations are usually built upon something much quieter: organization, shared belief, cooperation. The ability for thousands of strangers to work toward common goals. Liangzhu possessed these qualities in remarkable abundance. One of the strongest clues appears in its architecture. Unlike temporary settlements where homes appear wherever space is available, Liangzhu reveals careful planning almost everywhere archaeologists dig. Large platforms were raised above flood-prone ground. Wide open spaces separated important buildings. Residential districts formed recognizable neighborhoods. Storage areas occupied strategic locations. Waterways connected nearly every major part of the settlement. This required more than skilled builders. It required people capable of imagining an entire city before much of it even existed. That may sound familiar today. Modern architects first create drawings before buildings rise. Urban planners think about traffic before roads are constructed. Engineers calculate how rivers will behave before building dams. Liangzhu's planners worked differently, of course. They had no computers, no blueprints printed on paper, no satellites photographing the landscape from above. Instead, they relied upon memory, observation, experience. Perhaps they stood together on a small hill overlooking the wetlands, discussing where canals should flow and where new homes should be built. They watched the changing seasons. They observed floods year after year. Nature itself became their teacher. One particularly fascinating discovery suggests that Liangzhu's leaders understood something many modern cities still struggle to achieve. They respected water rather than trying to conquer it. Instead of forcing rivers into completely unnatural paths, they gently redirected them. The landscape continued breathing. Marshes remained alive. Water reservoirs filled naturally after seasonal rains. This relationship between humans and nature feels surprisingly balanced. Perhaps they understood that civilizations survive longest when they cooperate with the environment surrounding them. Many later societies ignored this lesson. Forests disappeared. Soil became exhausted. Rivers changed course because of poor planning. Eventually, entire regions suffered. Liangzhu, however, appears to have flourished for centuries by carefully observing natural rhythms. There is wisdom in moving slowly. Nature has always rewarded patience. As archaeologists expanded their excavations, another unexpected pattern slowly emerged. The city contained different kinds of buildings. Some structures appear ordinary. Others clearly served special purposes. Large raised platforms supported buildings that may have been ceremonial centers or homes for important members of society. Nearby, carefully arranged courtyards created spaces where many people could gather together. Imagine such a gathering. Hundreds of citizens stand quietly beneath the open sky. The air is still. A respected elder steps forward carrying a beautifully polished jade Kong. Everyone watches silently. No written speech survives. No ancient script tells us what was said. Yet somehow the moment feels meaningful. Perhaps prayers were offered. Perhaps seasonal festivals were celebrated. Perhaps important decisions affecting the entire community were announced. Whatever happened in these spaces, they remind us that civilizations are held together not only by food and buildings, but also by shared experiences. People need moments that connect them: festivals, ceremonies, traditions. Even today, communities gather for celebrations whose deeper meanings often stretch back centuries. Sometimes we continue traditions without fully remembering where they began. History quietly flows beneath everyday life. One remarkable feature of Liangzhu continues puzzling researchers. Unlike many ancient civilizations, clear evidence of large-scale warfare remains surprisingly limited during much of its existence. That does not necessarily mean conflict never happened. Human societies have always experienced disagreements, but compared with many later civilizations famous for military expansion, Liangzhu seems to have invested extraordinary energy elsewhere. Its greatest achievements were not giant armies. They were water systems, agriculture, craftsmanship, urban planning. This invites an interesting reflection. History books often focus upon wars because battles leave dramatic stories, yet peaceful achievements frequently change human lives much more deeply. A canal feeding thousands of families may matter more than a victorious battle. A new farming technique may save more lives than any famous general. A carefully designed city may improve daily existence for generations. Liangzhu quietly reminds us that greatness does not always arrive carrying weapons. Sometimes greatness arrives carrying a farming tool, or a polished piece of jade, or simply an idea. Perhaps that is why studying forgotten civilizations feels so rewarding. They encourage us to rethink what success really looks like. Around this time in our journey, another question gently appears. How large was Liangzhu's population? No exact answer exists. Historians estimate that tens of thousands of people may have lived throughout the broader Liangzhu region during its peak. If true, this represented an enormous concentration of population for its era. Supporting so many people required extraordinary agricultural success. Rice became the foundation of everything. Today, rice appears ordinary because billions of people eat it regularly. But in Liangzhu's world, producing reliable harvests demanded constant attention. Farmers carefully controlled water levels. Young rice plants required different conditions from mature crops. Floods could destroy months of labor. Drought could be equally dangerous. Success depended upon experience accumulated over countless growing seasons. Imagine an elderly farmer standing beside his grandson. He kneels, touches the wet soil, smiles quietly, and says almost nothing. The child watches. Learning begins, not inside classrooms, not from books, simply through shared experience. The grandson remembers. Years later, he teaches his own children exactly the same lesson. Knowledge quietly travels forward, invisible, unwritten, yet incredibly powerful. The same process likely shaped every important skill within Liangzhu. Boat builders learned by watching older craftsmen. Potters copied experienced hands. Jade workers practiced simple shapes before attempting masterpieces. Nothing happened quickly. Everything required time. Perhaps modern life has made us forget how valuable slow learning can be. Today, answers often arrive within seconds. Ancient civilizations understood another rhythm. Some knowledge cannot be rushed. It grows gradually inside the person learning it. The finest jade carving required years. The strongest farmer gained wisdom after many harvests. The most respected builder remembered floods from decades earlier. Experience became the greatest teacher. As the afternoon sun moves higher, Let us quietly leave the workshops for a while and follow one of Liangzhu's canals toward the surrounding countryside. The further we travel, the more villages begin appearing. Some consist of only a few homes. Others contain larger clusters of families. Children splash near the riverbanks. Women wash woven baskets in shallow water. Old fishermen repair nets while watching clouds drift overhead. Life seems simple. Yet every village contributes something important to the larger civilization. One settlement may specialize in growing rice. Another gathers timber from nearby forests. A third shapes pottery. Others process stone. Trade quietly links them all together. Boats become the lifelines connecting one community with another. This network is one reason Liangzhu fascinates archaeologists. It demonstrates that civilization is rarely built by one great city alone. Instead, many smaller communities cooperate like parts of a living body. The heart cannot survive without the lungs. The lungs cannot survive without the blood. Every part supports every other. Ancient societies understood this relationship remarkably well. Sometimes modern people imagine early civilizations as isolated worlds separated by endless wilderness. The truth appears more connected. Ideas traveled, goods traveled, people traveled. Marriage connected distant villages. Friendships crossed rivers. Children grew up hearing stories from places they had never visited. The world was already becoming larger, one journey at a time, one conversation at a time, one shared meal at a time. And somewhere beyond the distant hills, beyond the rivers carrying precious jade toward Liangzhu's workshops, another quiet chapter of this remarkable civilization was slowly beginning to unfold, one that would eventually transform not only the city itself, but also the destiny of everyone who called this forgotten kingdom home. The seasons passed so gently that no one living in Liangzhu could feel history moving beneath their feet. A child who watched his father repair a fishing net in the spring would one day become the father doing the same work. A young girl who learned to weave baskets beside her mother would later teach her own children the familiar movements of patient hands. The city changed slowly, so slowly that no single person could truly notice it. Yet if someone could have returned every 100 years, they would have seen something remarkable. New canals stretched farther across the wetlands. Fresh rice fields appeared where marshes had once been. Wooden homes became larger and more carefully built. Important ceremonial buildings rose upon wide earthen platforms. The civilization continued growing with quiet confidence. Growth, however, always brings new challenges. The more people a society supports, the more carefully it must organize itself. Food has to reach everyone. Water must be shared fairly. Conflicts must be settled before they become dangerous. Traditions become increasingly important because they give thousands of people a common understanding of how life should be lived. Perhaps this explains why ritual objects became so central to Liangzhu culture. Today, when we hear the word ritual, we sometimes imagine mysterious ceremonies hidden from ordinary people. But rituals often have much simpler purposes. They remind communities that everyone belongs to something larger than themselves. Harvest festivals, funeral ceremonies, seasonal celebrations, gatherings to welcome new life or honor those who have passed away. Across every civilization, such moments quietly strengthen social bonds. Liangzhu almost certainly possessed traditions like these. The jade objects found inside important burials suggest ceremonies filled with careful meaning. Imagine one peaceful evening near the center of the city. Families slowly gather beneath the fading light. Children remain unusually quiet because they understand this day is special. Elders wear beautifully woven clothing reserved for important occasions. Someone carefully carries a polished jade by disc whose smooth surface reflects the final colors of sunset. There is no shouting, no great display of power, only calm respect. Perhaps songs are sung. Perhaps stories are shared about ancestors whose wisdom continues guiding the living. Perhaps prayers rise toward the evening sky. We do not know the exact words. Those voices disappeared thousands of years ago. Yet the emotion behind such gatherings feels timeless. Every culture hopes to remember those who came before. Every generation wonders what kind of world it will leave behind. As archaeologists studied Liangzhu burials more closely, another fascinating pattern began to appear. Some tombs contained extraordinary collections of jade. Others contained only a few simple objects. This difference suggests that society had become increasingly organized into different social groups. Certain individuals clearly possessed greater influence. But what kind of leaders were they? That question remains wonderfully open. Were they kings, priests, clan elders, master builders? Perhaps they combined several roles at once. Many early civilizations did not separate political leadership from spiritual guidance. The same respected individual might organize farming projects, settle disagreements, lead ceremonies, and oversee major construction. Leadership often depended less upon written law and more upon personal trust. People followed those whose wisdom had been demonstrated over many years. Respect had to be earned. One particularly beautiful discovery tells us something about the values of Liangzhu society. Many jade carvings show extraordinary care, even in places that would rarely be seen. Tiny details hidden underneath larger designs were polished just as carefully as visible surfaces. Why spend weeks perfecting something almost nobody would notice? Perhaps because excellence itself mattered. Not applause, not public recognition, simply doing good work. That quiet lesson has survived 5,000 years. Even today, many master craftsmen continue polishing hidden parts of furniture, musical instruments, or buildings that customers may never examine closely. True craftsmanship often exists beyond the need for praise. It reflects personal character rather than public attention. Perhaps Liangzhu's jade artists understood this better than anyone. Each object became a conversation between the maker and the stone. No shortcuts existed. Patience could not be replaced. Time itself became part of the artwork. When modern scientists examine these carvings using microscopes, they sometimes discover incredibly fine marks left by ancient polishing techniques. The craftsmen never imagined that tiny traces of their work would still be visible thousands of years later. Yet there they remain, silent signatures left by hands whose names have long been forgotten. History often remembers famous rulers. Archaeology reminds us that anonymous craftsmen also deserve remembrance. Without them, civilizations leave behind very little. As we quietly continue walking through Liangzhu, another aspect of daily life slowly becomes visible: children. Ancient history often speaks about rulers and monuments, but every civilization depends upon its youngest members. Imagine a group of children running beside one of the canals. Their laughter echoes across the water. They skip smooth stones across the river's surface. Some help gather reeds. Others follow older brothers learning how to fish. Little girls sit beside their grandmothers weaving small mats from grasses growing along the wetlands. Learning begins through play. Responsibility grows gradually. Nobody expects perfection overnight. Knowledge accumulates naturally, a little today, a little tomorrow, year after year. This slow education shaped every generation. Perhaps one curious child wandered into a jade workshop and watched bright green dust slowly collecting beneath a craftsman's hands. He asked questions. The old artisan smiled. Instead of explaining everything immediately, he handed the child a small piece of ordinary stone. Learn this first. The greatest lessons often begin with simple tasks. Long before creating ceremonial masterpieces, apprentices probably spent years practicing straight lines, smooth curves, and polished surfaces. Mastery cannot be hurried. Nature itself teaches this truth. Trees require years before producing strong timber. Rivers carve valleys through patient persistence. Mountains rise over unimaginable lengths of time. Human skill follows similar rhythms. One careful improvement repeated thousands of times eventually becomes excellence. Perhaps that is why Liangzhu feels so peaceful to study. Its greatest achievements grew quietly rather than suddenly. There were no dramatic revolutions, no single inventor changing everything overnight. Instead, countless ordinary people each contributed one small improvement. Together, those improvements created an extraordinary civilization. As afternoon sunlight begins reflecting from the city's waterways, let us imagine another ordinary scene. A boat arrives carrying fresh jade from distant mountains. The journey has taken many weeks. The travelers are tired. Their clothes show signs of long days spent crossing rivers and forests. Yet as they carefully unload the heavy stones, craftsmen gather nearby with quiet excitement. Each rough block contains hidden possibilities. Most people see only stone. The experienced artisan already sees finished carvings waiting inside. Perhaps he gently touches the surface before speaking. He notices subtle colors invisible to others. Small natural lines suggest where the strongest material lies. The stone itself begins guiding his decisions. This relationship between craftsman and material appears throughout human history. A skilled carpenter studies the grain of wood before cutting it. A sculptor examines marble carefully before lifting the first tool. An experienced potter understands how wet clay wishes to move. Rather than forcing nature completely, great artists cooperate with it. The jade craftsmen of Liangzhu almost certainly worked the same way. The stone became their teacher. Patience became their greatest companion. Time became their most valuable tool. Meanwhile, life beyond the workshops continued following familiar rhythms. Rice fields turned bright green beneath warm summer sunlight. Fishermen checked woven traps before dawn. Smoke drifted gently above family homes each evening. Grandparents shared stories while children listened beside quiet fires. Dogs slept near doorways. Birds nested among reeds. The city lived, not as an archaeological site, not as a mystery, simply as home. That may be the easiest truth to forget when studying ancient civilizations. To us, Liangzhu appears extraordinary because thousands of years separate our lives from theirs. To its people, however, tomorrow probably looked much like yesterday. They worried about harvests. They celebrated births. They mourned loved ones. They hoped their children would enjoy peaceful futures. Across 5,000 years, human hopes have changed surprisingly little. The tools become different. The languages change. Cities grow larger. Yet the quiet dreams carried inside ordinary families remain wonderfully familiar. And as another calm evening settles across the waterways, the polished jade resting inside workshops glows softly beneath flickering firelight, while beyond the city walls the rivers continue flowing toward the distant sea, carrying with them silent reflections of a civilization that still seems destined to last for countless generations. Unaware that history, as it so often does, was already beginning to prepare an unexpected turn far beyond the horizon. For many generations, the people of Liangzhu had learned to read the language of nature. They knew when the first spring rains usually arrived. They recognized the songs of birds that appeared before the changing seasons. They understood how rivers quietly rose after distant storms, even when the skies above their own homes remained perfectly clear. Nature was not something separate from everyday life. It was their calendar, their teacher, their greatest partner. Every morning began with observation. An experienced farmer might pause before entering the rice fields. He would study the clouds for a few moments. He would feel the direction of the wind against his face. He would notice how insects moved among the grasses. These tiny details helped him understand what kind of day lay ahead. Today, satellites predict the weather. 5,000 years ago, careful attention performed the same task. Knowledge lived inside memory. Every generation added a little more. Every season offered another lesson. Perhaps this constant observation helped Liangzhu achieve something truly remarkable. Unlike civilizations that attempted to dominate nature through force, Liangzhu appears to have listened first. Its canals followed the shape of the land. Its reservoirs collected water where nature naturally guided it. Its rice fields occupied places where flooding could become a blessing instead of a disaster. This required patience. Patience has always been one of humanity's quietest forms of intelligence. Modern life often rewards speed. Ancient life rewarded careful timing. Plant too early and the crop might die. Plant too late and the harvest would be poor. Knowing exactly when to act often mattered more than acting quickly. The same principle shaped the jade workshops. No experienced craftsman hurried his work. If a piece of jade required another month of polishing, then another month was simply accepted. Time was part of the process. Nothing beautiful could be forced. Perhaps that is one reason Liangzhu's creations still appear so graceful today. Their beauty reflects thousands of unhurried decisions. As archaeologists continued uncovering more of the ancient city, they began finding evidence of neighborhoods that specialized in different activities. Some areas contained large numbers of pottery kilns. Others revealed woodworking. Certain locations produced evidence of stone processing. Meanwhile, the finest jade workshops appear to have occupied particularly important sections of the settlement. This tells us something fascinating. People were becoming specialists. Not everyone needed to know every skill. Instead, communities depended upon one another. One family became expert farmers. Another mastered fishing. Someone else became known for making strong wooden boats. Others learned the difficult art of polishing jade. This division of labor may sound ordinary today, but it represented a profound step in human history. When societies become specialized, knowledge grows much faster. Instead of everyone learning a little about everything, individuals spend entire lifetimes improving one craft. Imagine a young apprentice entering a pottery workshop at the age of 12. For years, he learns nothing except clay. He studies how wet earth feels beneath his fingers. He discovers exactly how long pots should dry before firing. He learns which temperatures strengthen the clay and which destroy it. By adulthood, his understanding becomes extraordinary. The same happened inside Liangzhu's jade workshops. Generations of craftsmen slowly refined techniques impossible for casual workers to master. Mastery grows quietly through repetition. There is another beautiful lesson hidden here. Many modern inventions appear suddenly because thousands of earlier improvements already existed. Nothing truly stands alone. The finest jade carving depended upon miners finding raw stone, boat builders transporting it, farmers feeding craftsmen, builders constructing workshops, families raising apprentices. Every masterpiece contained invisible contributions from countless ordinary people. History sometimes celebrates individuals. Reality usually belongs to communities. As we wander farther through the city, another feature gently captures our attention: the houses themselves. Most were built from wood, bamboo, reeds, and packed earth. These materials rarely survive thousands of years. Unlike stone temples or brick palaces, wooden homes gradually disappear beneath nature. At first glance, this seems unfortunate. Yet perhaps there is something beautiful about it. The homes eventually return to the earth from which they came. Only their foundations remained. From those foundations, archaeologists patiently reconstruct daily life. Post holes reveal where wooden pillars once stood. Layers of burned clay show where cooking fires had been used. Fragments of pottery suggest shared meals. Animal bones reveal favorite foods. Seeds preserved beneath wet soil tell us what crops people cultivated. Tiny discoveries slowly become complete stories. Imagine opening a book one letter at a time. That is how archaeology works. Each season of excavation adds another sentence. Each new discovery changes previous ideas. History is never completely finished. It continues growing with every careful excavation. One particularly fascinating discovery came from preserved rice. Thousands of tiny grains survived because wet conditions protected them beneath the soil. These ancient remains reveal that Liangzhu farmers had become remarkably skilled. Rice was no longer simply collected from wild plants. It was carefully cultivated. Fields were managed. Harvests were organized. Storage systems prevented waste. Without successful agriculture, none of Liangzhu's remarkable achievements would have been possible. Sometimes, while admiring beautiful jade objects inside museums, it is easy to forget the humble rice grain. Yet without rice, there would have been no workshops, no craftsmen, no ceremonies, no great city. Civilization often rests upon surprisingly ordinary foundations. As afternoon sunlight reflects across flooded fields, farmers continue working patiently. Children help carry bundles of young rice plants. Older workers repair irrigation channels damaged by recent rain. Nobody considers these tasks extraordinary, yet together they support one of humanity's earliest urban societies. History frequently hides greatness inside ordinary routines. That truth still applies today. Another question quietly appears. What did the people of Liangzhu believe about the world around them? The honest answer is that we do not fully know. Without written records, certainty remains impossible, but archaeology allows thoughtful guesses. The repeated use of certain animals suggests symbolic importance. Birds appear frequently. So do turtles, fish, serpentine creatures, human faces with unusually large eyes. Perhaps these represented protective spirits, perhaps ancestors, perhaps forces of nature. Many early cultures viewed rivers, mountains, forests, and animals as living parts of a connected universe. Liangzhu may have shared similar beliefs. One especially mysterious design appears on several jade kong. Large eyes stare outward from carefully carved faces. Their expressions seem calm rather than frightening. Some researchers wonder whether these figures represented divine beings watching over the people. Others believe they symbolized respected ancestors whose wisdom continued protecting later generations. Neither explanation can be proven. Perhaps the true meaning belonged to stories spoken around evening fires, stories never written down, stories carried only in memory. Eventually, those final storytellers disappeared. Their voices faded. Only the carvings remained. In a strange way, the jade itself became the storyteller. Every polished surface still invites questions. Every carved face quietly asks us to imagine forgotten beliefs. This partnership between imagination and evidence makes archaeology wonderfully unique. Unlike mathematics, archaeology rarely offers complete certainty. Instead, it encourages careful possibilities. Researchers compare discoveries, test ideas, revise conclusions. The past gradually becomes clearer without ever losing all of its mystery. Perhaps that is exactly as it should be. Not every question requires a final answer. Some mysteries continue inspiring curiosity across generations. As the day slowly begins moving toward evening, a soft breeze passes through the reeds surrounding Liangzhu. Boats return carrying fish caught before sunset. Smoke rises gently above family homes. Children finish their games and hurry indoors. Craftsmen carefully cover unfinished jade pieces before tomorrow's work begins again. The city settles into another peaceful night. No one suspects that centuries from now, people across distant lands will know nothing of their names. They simply believe tomorrow will arrive as it always has. Calm, predictable, full of familiar work. Yet somewhere beyond the horizon, almost too slowly for anyone to notice, subtle changes are beginning to unfold across the natural world. Changes that will eventually test even a civilization as thoughtful, organized, and resilient as Liangzhu in ways no generation before them had ever experienced. For many years, perhaps even centuries, the people of Liangzhu believed they understood the rivers. They had studied them since childhood. They had watched them rise after distant storms. They had learned where the water would spread, where it would slow, and where it would quietly return to its familiar banks. That knowledge had served them well. Their canals continued carrying water into the rice fields. Their reservoirs filled and emptied with remarkable reliability. Their harvests remained strong. The city continued to prosper. It must have seemed as though this careful balance could continue forever. History often feels that way while it is happening. People rarely realize they are standing at the highest point of a civilization. Only much later do historians recognize the signs. Perhaps Liangzhu experienced something similar. At first, the changes were almost impossible to notice. One summer may have brought slightly heavier rains. Another year perhaps felt a little warmer than usual. The river remained manageable, but elders quietly remarked that it behaved differently from when they were children. No one panicked. Nature had always changed from season to season. Small differences were expected. Life continued. Fields were planted. Children were born. Jade workshops remained busy. Boats carried rice through the canals. Everything appeared normal. Yet nature has its own long rhythms. Sometimes they unfold so gradually that entire generations never recognize them. Modern scientists have spent many years trying to understand what eventually happened to Liangzhu. Unlike ancient storytellers, they do not search for mythical curses or legendary battles. Instead, they examine layers of soil, tiny grains of pollen, ancient sediments, minerals left behind by floodwaters. Even microscopic organisms preserved beneath the earth become silent witnesses. Every layer tells part of the story, like pages stacked one above another. When researchers carefully studied these natural records, an interesting pattern slowly emerged. Around 4,300 years ago, the environment appears to have changed dramatically. Evidence suggests that this region experienced an unusually long period of intense rainfall. Not one storm, not one flood, but repeated years during which enormous amounts of water reshaped the landscape. Imagine being a farmer during such a time. The first unusually heavy rains might even seem welcome. Rice loves water, reservoirs fill, harvests appear secure, but eventually there can be too much of a good thing. Canals overflow, riverbanks weaken, fields remain underwater longer than expected, paths disappear beneath rising water, homes built safely above ordinary floods suddenly face conditions never experienced before. One flood can be repaired. Several floods become exhausting. Years of repeated flooding begin changing everything. Modern climate scientists studying cave formations in eastern China have found evidence supporting this possibility. Tiny mineral layers inside ancient caves preserve records of rainfall stretching back thousands of years. These natural archives suggest that unusually wet conditions may indeed have occurred during the period when Liangzhu declined. It is remarkable that a cave ceiling can quietly remember weather long after human memories disappear. Nature keeps records in ways we are only beginning to understand. Now imagine living through those years. A father walks to inspect the rice fields after another week of relentless rain. The water stands far deeper than it should. Young plants struggle to survive. Neighbors gather silently along the edge of a canal that has overflowed once again. No one speaks immediately. There is little to say. Everyone sees the same thing. The land they trusted is changing. Perhaps they repair the embankments. Perhaps they strengthen the dams. Perhaps they succeed for a while. Human beings have always been remarkably resilient. Communities rarely abandon their homes after one difficult season. Instead, they rebuild. They adapt. They hope that next year will be better. Hope has carried civilizations through countless hardships. Liangzhu's people almost certainly hoped as well. Yet history reminds us that sometimes nature changes faster than even the wisest communities can adapt. This does not diminish their achievements. Rather, it highlights how deeply every civilization depends upon the environment surrounding it. Even the greatest cities cannot exist without stable water, fertile soil, and predictable seasons. Today, we often think of climate as something discussed by scientists. Ancient civilizations experienced it directly every single day. Rain determined survival. Sunlight shaped harvests. Changing rivers altered entire societies. Liangzhu teaches this lesson with remarkable clarity. As archaeologists continued excavating the city, they noticed another quiet detail. Construction activity appears to slow during the civilization's final period. Fewer large projects were completed. Some important areas show signs of reduced maintenance. Canals that once received constant attention may have become increasingly difficult to manage. This does not suggest sudden collapse. Instead, it hints at gradual change. History often prefers dramatic endings. Reality usually moves more slowly. Imagine an elderly craftsman sitting inside his workshop. He notices fewer apprentices arriving than before. Some families have moved elsewhere after difficult harvests. Raw jade becomes harder to obtain because transportation routes remain flooded. Orders for ceremonial objects become less frequent. Nothing changes overnight, yet each season feels slightly different. The familiar rhythm begins losing its certainty. Perhaps younger people quietly discuss leaving, not because they wish to abandon their home, but because they hope to find more reliable farmland elsewhere. Migration has always been part of human history. Families follow opportunity, communities shift, traditions travel with them. If this happened in Liangzhu, many people may have carried their knowledge into new regions. Their civilization disappeared. Its people probably did not. This distinction matters greatly. Civilizations are ideas as much as places. A city may fade, but its skills can survive. Its customs may continue. Its descendants may build new communities carrying fragments of older traditions. This possibility helps explain something fascinating. Although Liangzhu eventually vanished as a political and cultural center, the importance of jade never disappeared from Chinese civilization. Generation after generation continued respecting the stone. Its meanings evolved. Its artistic styles changed. Yet the deep admiration remained. Perhaps distant echoes of Liangzhu continued living inside later cultures without anyone remembering exactly where those traditions began. History often works this way. Ideas quietly outlive names. As we walk through the ancient city one final time before night falls, everything appears strangely peaceful. The canals still reflect the evening sky. The rice fields shimmer beneath gentle wind. Birds circle above the wetlands exactly as they have done for thousands of years. Nothing about the landscape announces that enormous changes are approaching. Nature rarely provides dramatic warnings. Instead, it whispers. A slightly higher river, a slightly longer rainy season, a harvest just a little smaller than usual. One year becomes another. Tiny differences slowly accumulate. Only when looking backward do we recognize the pattern. Perhaps this is one of Liangzhu's greatest lessons. The most important changes in history often begin almost invisibly, not with loud announcements, not with sudden disasters, but with quiet shifts that only patient observers eventually understand. The people of Liangzhu had always been patient observers. They watched rivers, clouds, birds, seasons. For centuries, those observations allowed their civilization to flourish. Now they faced changes unlike anything their ancestors had experienced. The knowledge passed faithfully from generation to generation suddenly encountered a world behaving in unfamiliar ways. No civilization, no matter how wise, possesses every answer forever. That realization does not make Liangzhu a story of failure. Instead, it makes it profoundly human. Because every generation eventually meets challenges its ancestors could never have imagined. And every generation must decide, with the knowledge it possesses, how to respond. As darkness gently settles over the wetlands once again, the last lights inside the Jade workshop slowly fade, while beyond the quiet city walls, the rivers continue their endless journey toward the sea, carrying with them the first almost invisible signs that the peaceful world of Liangzhu was beginning to enter the most uncertain chapter of its long and remarkable story. The following spring arrived, just as countless springs had arrived before it. Wildflowers appeared along the edges of the wetlands. Birds returned to familiar nesting places. The morning mist once again floated gently above the canals. To someone visiting for the first time, Liangzhu would still appear prosperous. Children continued laughing near the water. Farmers prepared their fields. Craftsmen opened their workshops. Life moved forward. Yet beneath this familiar rhythm, quiet adjustments were already becoming part of everyday life. People repaired embankments more often than they once had. Boat routes changed as some waterways became more difficult to navigate. Farmers watched the sky with greater concern. The elders spoke more frequently about unusual weather. No single event seemed extraordinary. Together, however, these small changes slowly reshaped the civilization. History rarely announces itself with one dramatic moment. It often arrives disguised as ordinary days. One conversation, one difficult harvest, one unexpected flood, one family deciding to settle somewhere else. Years later, those quiet decisions become turning points that nobody recognized at the time. Modern archaeologists often describe Liangzhu's disappearance as a gradual transformation rather than a sudden destruction. That distinction is important. Movies sometimes teach us to expect civilizations to end in flames. Reality is often gentler. People simply adapt. Communities slowly move. Old centers lose importance. New settlements appear elsewhere. Life continues, even if maps eventually change. Imagine a family living near the outer edge of Liangzhu. The grandparents remember years when the rice harvests were larger. The parents spend more time repairing damaged irrigation channels. The youngest children accept these conditions as normal because they have known nothing else. Each generation experiences the same place differently. That is true in every age. The world our grandparents remember is never exactly the world we inherit. Still, hope remains. Perhaps after another difficult season, village leaders gather beneath a large wooden shelter overlooking the canals. There are no written reports spread across a table. Instead, everyone contributes memories. One elder remembers where floods flowed 50 years earlier. Another suggests strengthening a nearby embankment. A farmer proposes opening a new channel to guide excess water away from valuable fields. The discussion continues long into the evening. Nobody is searching for blame. They are searching for solutions. That image reminds us of something timeless. Human beings have always tried to solve problems together. Long before universities, governments, or scientific institutions, communities relied upon shared observation and collective wisdom. Liangzhu almost certainly did the same. Its remarkable engineering achievements suggest a society capable of thoughtful planning. If conditions became more difficult, they would not simply surrender. They would experiment, adjust, learn, and perhaps for many years those efforts succeeded. One of the most remarkable aspects of archaeology is that silence itself becomes evidence. Sometimes what researchers do not find is just as important as what they discover. At Liangzhu, archaeologists have found no convincing evidence that a powerful invading army swept through the city. There are no widespread burn layers suggesting enormous destruction. No clear signs of massive warfare ending the civilization in a single catastrophic event. Instead, many places seem simply to have been left behind. Buildings slowly decayed. Wood returned to the earth. Canals filled with sediment. Nature quietly reclaimed spaces once filled with daily life. This peaceful abandonment feels strangely moving. Imagine locking the door of your home one final time, not because you no longer love it, but because circumstances have changed beyond your control. Perhaps you promise yourself that one day you will return. Maybe some families actually did. Perhaps others settled permanently in new lands. History cannot tell us every detail. Yet archaeology reminds us that leaving a place is often one of the hardest decisions people ever make. Across thousands of years, that experience remains deeply familiar. Another quiet mystery appears here. Where did the people go? The answer is surprisingly hopeful. They did not simply vanish. Human beings rarely disappear without descendants. Instead, many scholars believe the people of Liangzhu gradually became part of later communities throughout eastern China. Their villages changed. Their traditions blended with others. Their children married into neighboring cultures. Over generations, identities slowly transformed. Imagine pouring clear water into a flowing river. After a short distance, it becomes impossible to separate one from the other. The water has not disappeared. It has become part of something larger. Perhaps Liangzhu's people experienced something similar. Their civilization faded. Their bloodlines continued. Their knowledge traveled with them. Their stories changed with each generation until eventually no one remembered where some traditions had first begun. This idea changes the way we think about lost civilizations. Perhaps very few civilizations are ever truly lost. Their cities may vanish. Their names may disappear. But their influence continues quietly inside later cultures. Sometimes the greatest legacy is invisible. One particularly fascinating example may be found in the continued importance of jade throughout Chinese history. Thousands of years after Liangzhu's decline, jade still occupied a place of extraordinary respect. Kings treasured it. Artists carved it. Philosophers praised its virtues. Families passed jade ornaments from one generation to the next. Its meaning evolved, but its value endured. Could some of those traditions trace distant roots back to Liangzhu? Many researchers believe that possibility deserves serious consideration. Direct proof remains difficult. Yet cultural ideas often survive much longer than political systems. Empires rise and fall. Beliefs quietly endure. As we slowly leave the city behind, let us imagine the landscape many centuries later. The great earthen platforms remain, though grass now covers them. Wooden buildings have disappeared. Only their foundations rest beneath the soil. The canals continue carrying water, but reeds begin growing where boats once traveled. Birds nest among abandoned embankments. Trees slowly spread across former neighborhoods. Children from entirely different cultures may one day wander these fields without realizing they are walking across the streets of an ancient city. Time has remarkable patience. Nature never rushes. Season after season, leaves fall. Rain softens forgotten walls. Wind carries seeds into abandoned courtyards. Little by little, the city becomes part of the landscape itself. Eventually, even memory fades. Thousands of years pass. New kingdoms appear. Bronze replaces stone. Writing develops. Dynasties rise. Great philosophers are born. Armies march. Trade routes connect distant worlds. Entire chapters of history unfold. Yet beneath the quiet fields, Liangzhu waits, not asleep, not gone, simply waiting. Waiting for someone curious enough to notice unusual pieces of jade emerging from the earth. Waiting for careful archaeologists to ask gentle questions instead of quick ones. Waiting for patient excavation to reveal stories hidden beneath layers of mud deposited by ancient floods. There is something wonderfully fitting about that. A civilization built upon patience could only be rediscovered through patience. No machine could uncover its meaning in a single afternoon. Every artifact required careful cleaning. Every foundation demanded slow excavation. Every conclusion emerged through years of thoughtful research. In a way, modern archaeologists became students of the same lesson that Liangzhu's jade craftsmen had understood thousands of years earlier. Important work cannot be rushed. As evening once again settles over the wetlands in our imagination, the quiet waters reflect a sky filled with soft golden light. The voices of the ancient city are no longer heard. The workshops stand empty. The boats no longer glide through the canals, yet something remains. Not only the jade, not only the ruins, but also the remarkable reminder that human greatness is not measured only by famous empires whose names fill history books. Sometimes greatness lives in a civilization that left no written history, no celebrated kings, and no towering stone monuments, yet still possess the wisdom to shape rivers, master one of the world's hardest stones, build harmonious cities, and leave behind works of beauty so extraordinary that thousands of years later they continue inviting us to slow down, look closely, and quietly wonder about the countless forgotten hands that helped shape the long story of humanity. As our quiet journey slowly comes to its final steps, let us remain here for just a little longer. The evening sky has settled gently over the ancient wetlands. The wind moves softly through the tall reeds. Water continues flowing along paths first shaped thousands of years ago. The people who once walked these riverbanks are gone. Their voices have faded into silence. Their homes have returned to the earth. Their language has disappeared. And yet, in a strange and beautiful way, they are still here. Not because we know their names, not because their kings were remembered, but because every carefully polished piece of jade still carries the touch of the hands that created it. Every canal still tells us that these people understood water with remarkable wisdom. Every rice field uncovered by archaeologists reminds us that great civilizations are often built not by extraordinary moments, but by ordinary days repeated with patience. The story of Liangzhu quietly changes the way we think about history. For many generations, people believed that the earliest chapters of Chinese civilization began somewhere else. Then beneath peaceful fields, another story slowly emerged, not to replace the old one, but to make it richer, more complete. History is rarely a straight line. It is more like a great river. Many streams join together. Some remain visible. Others disappear beneath the surface before returning again many miles later. Liangzhu was one of those hidden streams. For thousands of years it flowed quietly beneath history itself, unseen but never truly gone. Its rediscovery reminds us of something deeply comforting. The past is far larger than what we currently know. Every year archaeologists uncover new evidence. A forgotten village, an ancient tool, a child's footprint preserved in mud, a seed buried beneath the soil, a piece of pottery waiting patiently underground. Each discovery gently whispers the same message. There is still more to learn. Perhaps that is one of the greatest gifts history offers us. It teaches humility. No matter how much we believe we understand the ancient world, the earth continues holding its own quiet secrets. Sometimes a single discovery changes decades of accepted ideas. Sometimes the greatest surprise has been resting beneath our feet all along. The people of Liangzhu never imagined that strangers living 5,000 years in the future would admire their work. They simply lived their lives. They planted rice before sunrise. They repaired canals after heavy rain. They taught children the skills their parents had taught them. They spent endless hours polishing jade until rough stone became something beautiful. They laughed together. They mourned together. They celebrated harvests. They hoped their children would have peaceful lives. Across thousands of years, those hopes still feel familiar. Technology has transformed our world. Languages have changed. Cities have grown beyond anything Liangzhu's people could have imagined. Yet the quiet hopes inside the human heart remain remarkably similar. We still wish for safety. We still treasure family. We still search for meaning. We still create beautiful things, hoping they will outlast us. Perhaps that is why this forgotten civilization continues speaking to us. Not because it is completely different, but because it quietly reminds us how much we share with people who lived unimaginably long ago. The jade they carved remains one of the strongest symbols of that connection. A stone formed deep inside the earth, patiently shaped by human hands, patiently buried beneath the soil, patiently rediscovered thousands of years later. Its entire story is one of patience, and maybe that is Liangzhu's greatest lesson. Some of the most meaningful things in life cannot be rushed. Knowledge grows slowly, trust grows slowly, communities grow slowly, mastery grows slowly. Even history reveals itself slowly. In today's fast-moving world, that lesson feels more valuable than ever. As we prepare to leave this ancient landscape behind, take one last look across the calm waters. The canals shimmer beneath the evening sky. The reeds sway gently with the breeze. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the sun quietly disappears, just as it did for the people of Liangzhu thousands of years ago. Night falls. The birds settle into silence. The rivers continue their endless journey toward the sea. And beneath the peaceful earth, the memory of a forgotten Jade Kingdom remains, not as a tale of mystery alone, but as a quiet reminder that humanity's greatest achievements are often built with patience, cooperation, curiosity, and hope. Thank you for taking this slow walk through one of history's most remarkable forgotten civilizations. If tonight's journey brought you a little peace, a little wonder, or perhaps helped you drift into a calmer state of mind, then I hope you'll join me again for another gentle walk through the hidden chapters of our shared human story. Until then, may your thoughts be peaceful, may your night be calm, and may history always remind you that there are still countless stories waiting quietly beneath the surface, ready to be discovered by those willing to slow down and listen. Good night.